The soft, relentless hum of a cheap desk lamp was the only anchor holding me to reality as the clock on my bedroom wall ticked past 3 in the morning. For 5 long, grueling years, that dim circle of light had been my absolute sanctuary, a solitary witness to a battle the rest of the world refused to see. I was 19-year-old Elena Rossi, and my entire teenage existence had been defined not by high school dances, weekend parties, or carefree summers, but by an unyielding, mechanical discipline. Since the exact day I turned 14, while my peers were enjoying the comforts of their family privileges, my life had been split into 2 punishing halves. By day, I maintained a flawless academic record, forcing my eyes to scan textbook pages until the letters stopped dancing and blurred into focus against the heavy weight of my chronic dyslexia. By night, I scrubbed greasy kitchen counters at a local diner, ran inventory logs for a local shipping warehouse, and tutored underclassmen until my voice was rough with exhaustion. I didn't collect these hardships out of a desire for martyrdom. I did it because I was trapped in a household that treated my presence like an expensive, secondary inconvenience. My parents, Maria and Tony Rossi, had made it abundantly clear that my dreams were entirely my own responsibility, a luxury the family could simply not afford to sponsor. Every single penny I earned from my exhausting double shifts went directly toward application fees, supplementary diagnostic materials, and the specialized tutoring I needed to conquer my learning disability. The ultimate, shining beacon at the end of that dark highway arrived on a crisp Tuesday afternoon in the form of a heavy, cream-colored envelope bearing the golden seal of Stanford University. I remember standing in our narrow hallway, my hands shaking so violently that I tore the paper edge, my eyes filling with hot tears as I read the words confirming a $250,000 merit scholarship. It was a full, unconditional ride, a historic acknowledgement of my academic intellect, and the definitive proof that my hard work belonged exclusively to me. For a single, beautiful second, the suffocating pressure in my chest vanished, and I believed I had finally bought my way out of the shadows. I had absolutely no idea that the people who gave me life were already standing in the dark, waiting to violently strip that future away from me for the sake of their favorite child. The celebration inside our suburban home lasted less than 10 minutes before the toxic hierarchy of the Rossi household asserted its crushing weight. My brother, Luca, who was 21 and still lived in the finished basement, didn't even look up from his gaming console when I showed my parents the official award letter. Luca was the undisputed golden child, a boy whose profound laziness was treated by my parents as a delicate, artistic trait and whose continuous failures were always blamed on the outside world. He had dropped out of 2 community colleges, accumulated thousands in luxury credit card debt, and spent his days drifting through an artificially cushioned reality funded by my parents' frantic financial gymnastics. My mother, Maria, slowly set her teacup down on the kitchen island, her eyes narrow and completely devoid of maternal pride as she scanned the financial breakdown of my scholarship. "This is a massive amount of liquid capital, Elena," my mother stated, her voice carrying a smooth, manipulative coldness that made my blood instantly run quiet. "But we have to look at the collective stability of this family structure before we allow you to run off to California to spend this money on your own comfort. Your brother Luca has been facing a severe psychological slump, and his career opportunities are completely blocked because he lacks the elite educational pedigree that Stanford represents." My father, Tony, stepped into the room, leaning his heavy frame against the doorway, his jaw tightly clenched as he adjusted a glistening, expensive luxury watch on his wrist. "We have already contacted a private legacy consultant through our social circle," Tony added, his tone carrying an unyielding, patriarchal finality that left no room for debate. "The consultant has verified that if we submit a formal amendment to the scholarship board, citing a severe family restructuring, we can legally reallocate the primary funding lines to Luca's name. Luca will take your slot in the upcoming enrollment cycle, and you can continue your nursing shifts here in the city, living at home for free while you help us manage the monthly household utility balances. You're the strong one, Elena. You've always been the independent child who figures things out on her own, but your brother desperately needs this cushion to survive." I stared at my parents, the absolute lack of shame in their features revealing a depravity so deep that the final remnants of my childhood illusions dissolved into pure, clinical ice. They weren't just asking for a sacrifice, they were actively trying to steal my identity, my academic achievement, and the $250,000 ladder I had bled to build. They truly believed that my typical quiet nature and fear of family isolation would force me to sign the amendment documents and hand my life's work to a sibling who had never read a full book. Before a single word of defiance could escape my lips, the smartphone clutched in my hand vibrated with a high-priority, encrypted notification that would completely shatter the battlefield. It was an urgent, secure video link sent directly from the office of the president at Stanford University, requiring my immediate digital presence regarding severe financial inconsistencies on my FAFSA profiles. I retreated to my bedroom, locking the heavy wooden door behind me with a definitive turn of the key, my heart rate entirely steady as the survival instincts of an outcast took complete monopoly of my mind. I opened my laptop, initiated the secure connection, and within seconds, the screen illuminated to reveal the private executive office of Stanford President Alastair Thorne. Beside him sat a woman with sharp, razor-cut hair and an expression of pure, unyielding professionalism, Sarah Chin, a senior forensic investigator specializing in institutional financial compliance. "Thank you for joining us so quickly, Elena," President Thorne began, his voice deep, gravelly, and carrying a heavy, paternal weight that filled my quiet bedroom. "Our financial aid underwriting algorithms flagged a catastrophic discrepancy between your personal tax disclosures and a hidden corporate entity linked directly to your biological registry. According to the federal FAFSA databases you submitted, your family lives in near total poverty, requiring emergency state assistance and independent student funding to survive. But our secondary compliance sweep has uncovered a massive, private multi-million-dollar trust fund registered under an offshore corporate entity named Titan Holdings. The legal trust documents explicitly list you, Elena Rossi, as the sole primary beneficiary and absolute owner of the entire asset portfolio." A wave of pure, disorienting confusion washed over my mind, my dyslexia making the digital numbers on the screen look like a chaotic, swirling puzzle. "That's impossible, President Thorne," I stammered, my fingers tightly gripping the edge of my desk as I shook my head in absolute disbelief. "My parents have told me since I was 14 that we are completely broke, that we have no savings, and that I had to pay for my own medical diagnostic tests out of my diner tips." Sarah Chin leaned forward, sliding a crisp, high-resolution document scan across the shared digital interface, her eyes locking onto mine through the lens of the camera. "The papers are entirely authentic, Elena, and this is where the compliance trajectory takes a highly irregular, criminal turn," Sarah Chin stated, her tone dropping into a chilling, razor-sharp precision. The multi-million-dollar trust fund under Titan Holdings was not established through standard corporate investments or family inheritance lines. It was paid out 15 years ago by a major metropolitan hospital group as part of a massive, non-precedent settlement for a severe neurological injury inflicted on you as an infant. A corrupt medical technician had accidentally administered an unapproved, highly concentrated chemical compound during a routine diagnostic scan, causing permanent, localized cognitive damage. That specific physical trauma to your developing brain is the exact, documented medical cause of your severe, lifelong dyslexia. The hospital group settled out of court to avoid a public trial, transferring millions of dollars into a secure, protected trust meant exclusively to fund your medical care, specialized education, and lifetime structural support. The room around me fell into an absolute, suffocating silence, the only sound being the frantic, chaotic beating of my own heart against my ribs. The devastating psychological plot twist laid itself bare before my eyes with the cold, mathematical certainty of a death warrant. The learning disability that had made my childhood a living hell, the reading barrier that I had wept over for thousands of hours, was the direct result of a crime that had been bought and paid for before I could even talk. But the true, sickening depravity of the Rossi household was revealed in the secondary folder of the forensic audit report. Sarah Chin adjusted her glasses, her fingers scrolling through a series of historical medical summaries and altered corporate registration files. Your parents, Maria and Tony, were named as the temporary administrative guardians of the fund until you reached the legal age of 25, she explained, her voice dripping with an intense, professional disgust. But our handwriting specialists and digital forensics units have discovered that 12 years ago, your parents systematically forged the hospital's clinical summaries. They used an early digital editing lightpad to completely erase your name from the secondary injury reports, altering the legal text to frame your brother, Luca, as the disabled infant victim of the medical malpractice. They created a massive, parallel paper trail of fraudulent medical records, claiming that Luca required constant, private luxury treatments to manage his non-existent cognitive deficiencies. By framing the golden child as the victim, they successfully managed to bypass the court's strict oversight committees, granting them unchecked access to the trust's liquid capitals. While they kept you in a state of artificially constructed poverty, forcing you to work double shifts since the age of 14 just to afford basic food, they were siphoning your millions. They used your pain, your brain damage, and your stolen future to buy themselves an elegant lifestyle under the table, funding expensive luxury watches, designer bags, and premium vacations while claiming the family was drowning in debt. They have spent a decade living like kings off the blood money of a daughter they treated like an invisible slave, and right now, they are preparing to use your forged consent codes to let the remaining assets default into Luca's private account. A wave of white-hot, dangerous fury threatened to consume my mind, but the years of survival and discipline I had cultivated since childhood instantly overrode the panic, hardening my thoughts into pure strategy. They believed that because I was an isolated, 19-year-old girl with a learning disability, I would never have the resources or the intellect to challenge their absolute control. They had absolutely no idea that by trying to steal my Stanford scholarship, they had accidentally walked straight into the jaws of a multi-agency institutional enforcement network. Elena, President Thorne said, his expression carrying a freezing, absolute severity that mirrored the resolve in my own chest. Stanford University does not tolerate fraud, but more importantly, we protect our scholars. Sarah Chin is not just an investigator. She is a senior board member of a ruthless, white-collar criminal defense firm that operates globally. If you authorize us to act as your legal proxies right now, we will turn this upcoming scholarship amendment review into a definitive boardroom battle that will completely dismantle your parents' existence. I looked at the digital document scans displaying the luxury watches my father proudly wore, watches funded by the very brain injury that made me cry over my homework every single night. The final chains of familial guilt broke completely away from my soul, leaving behind a clean, unbreakable resolve that carried the weight of an absolute finality. "Ink the signatures, Sarah," I said, my voice smooth, chillingly calm, and entirely level as I stared into the camera lens. "Let's show them what reality looks like." The high-stakes boardroom battle via Zoom commenced on Friday morning with the silent, mechanical precision of an execution squad executing a clinical strike. My parents and Luca had gathered in the main dining room, dressing themselves in their finest designer apparel, fully confident that the scholarship committee was convening to approve the transfer of my funding to Luca. They had set up their laptop at the head of the mahogany table, my mother smoothing down her silk blouse while my father adjusted his stolen luxury watch in front of the lens. I sat at the far end of the dining table, entirely quiet, a single leather folder resting before my folded hands as the digital boardroom line fully connected. The screen illuminated to reveal not just the 3 standard regional scholarship coordinators, but the entire senior executive board of Stanford University, presided over by President Alastair Thorne. Beside him sat Sarah Chin, surrounded by a team of uniformed state fraud investigators and forensic compliance officers who remained entirely silent in the shadows of the background. "Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Rossi," President Thorne announced, his booming voice carrying a freezing, clinical resonance that instantly caused my mother's theatrical smile to freeze. "We are assembled today to review the urgent amendment application submitted by your household to reallocate Elena Rossi's $250,000 merit scholarship to her brother, Luca." Maria Rossi leaned forward, her face instantly arranging itself into a mask of watery, manipulative desperation as she prepared to deploy her practiced lies. "Thank you so much for your time, President Thorne," my mother purred, her voice dripping with a fake maternal sorrow that made my skin crawl. "It is a deeply painful family situation, but our poor Luca suffers from a severe, undocumented cognitive processing deficiency due to a tragic childhood event, and Elena has magnanimously decided to step down so her brother can have a chance at life. She has signed the consent disclosures, and we are ready to finalize the corporate routing transfers today to ensure Luca's enrollment is secure." I didn't let her finish the paragraph, and I didn't give her the satisfaction of a loud, emotional sisterly argument that would allow her to paint me as an irrational child. I simply leaned forward, tapped a single button on my smartphone device, and executed a total, unyielding data override of the shared digital presentation screen. The fake medical documents my mother had uploaded were instantly violently replaced by a series of high-resolution, cold forensic pictures that sent an immediate shockwave of pure horror through the dining room. The screen displayed crystal-clear digital scans of my mother's private checkbook logs, matching the exact routing numbers of the Titan Holdings trust fund to the purchase invoices of her designer handbags. Beside it lay the hidden legal ledger compiled by Sarah Chin, documenting every single forged signature overlay my father had executed on the ICU hospital summaries 15 years ago. The true, raw timeline of their multi-million-dollar criminal conspiracy filled the digital boardroom with a heavy, suffocating weight, causing the scholarship coordinators to gasp in absolute loathing. "What is the meaning of this?" Tony Rossi roared, standing up from his chair so violently it slammed against the dining room wall, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. "Elena, turn that garbage off immediately. This is an unauthorized intrusion of our private corporate property, and you are completely destroying your family's reputation." "Your father is entirely correct, Mr. Rossi. This is an intrusion." Sarah Chen's voice cut through the speaker like a physical blade, her eyes locking onto my parents through the camera. "But the intrusion is being executed by the Federal Financial Crimes Enforcement Network and state fraud investigators who have been monitoring your offshore escrow lines since yesterday morning. The medical summaries you submitted to this board are not just an alternative family plan. They are the undisputed, certified evidence of a multi-million-dollar felony identity theft and estate forgery caught in active progress. The trust fund you have been looting for 12 years belongs exclusively to your daughter Elena as compensation for the physical brain damage you spent a decade ignoring. An emergency federal freeze order has already been executed on your bank accounts, your logistical consultancy lines are locked, and your assets are officially seized by the state pending immediate criminal prosecution." The sudden transformation from absolute, unyielding arrogance to blinding, suffocating panic inside our dining room was a magnificent, brutal domino effect to behold. My mother's mouth opened and closed in absolute, silent terror, the silk handkerchief slipping from her fingers and falling onto the table as the reality of her total ruin crashed into her mind. Luca let out a sharp, pathetic whimper of pure psychological collapse, violently slamming his gaming console onto the floor as he realized his unearned luxury cushion had vanished forever. "You promised me nobody would ever check the original ICU toxicology dates, Mom," Luca screamed, turning on his own mother with a blind, desperate vitriol that exposed their criminal alignment to the entire active recording board. "You said the notary clerk took the hush money to bury the file." I sat perfectly still at the far end of the mahogany table, a cold, calculating satisfaction settling deep into my bones as I watched the family that had exploited my youth completely turn on each other within seconds. They began screaming obscenities, their masks of respectable high society elegance completely shattering to reveal the raw, ugly greed that had defined their lives from the very beginning. I closed my laptop with a clean, soft click, disconnecting from their chaotic universe forever, leaving the federal agents to catalog the raw panic of their exposure. I walked up the stairs to my small bedroom for the last time, my movements calm, mechanical, and entirely graceful as I packed a single, minimalist suitcase with my basic clothes and design journals. I didn't leave a note, and I didn't wait around to watch the state troopers slide the heavy steel handcuffs over my parents' wrists, because their punishment was a matter of mathematics, not drama. As I walked out of the front door into the bright, crisp afternoon sunlight, the sirens of the approaching law enforcement vehicles echoing in the distance, a profound sense of total victory settled deep into my soul. I left the house of cards behind in the dirt, stepping into a rideshare vehicle that President Thorne had personally organized to transport me to the airport. The pacing of my life slowed down beautifully over the subsequent 5 years, allowing the frantic trauma of my youth to transition into a flawless current of pure professional triumph and immense wealth. Supported by the unyielding backing of Stanford University and the legal team of Sarah Chin, I completed my undergraduate and graduate programs with highest honors, my brilliant analytical mind becoming a legend among the corporate compliance circles of California. The state courts executed a total, unconditional asset restoration, stripping my parents of every single ounce of their administrative authority and transferring the full multi-million-dollar trust fund portfolio under my exclusive, unilateral control. My parents and brother were forced to face the true, agonizing weight of their choices in absolute isolation. Maria and Tony were sentenced to a substantial period in a federal facility for grand larceny and identity forgery, while their mansion was foreclosed on to pay back the siphoned capitals to my registry. Luca was forced to abandon his Playboy delusions entirely, securing a low-wage manual labor job just to afford a cramped studio apartment on the industrial outskirts of the state. On the morning of my graduation ceremony, I stood on the manicured lawns of the Stanford campus, wearing my black satin gown and my high honors cords, the warm California sun painting the sky in shades of gold and deep violet. I held my master's degree in corporate compliance and financial law in my hands, my fingers steady, my eyes scanning the beautifully printed text without a single letter dancing out of place. I had conquered the dyslexia, I had conquered the family that tried to let me rot in the dark, and I had built a sovereign empire entirely with my own resilience and integrity. If you are listening to this story right now, and you are the child whose silence and sacrifices have been systematically weaponized by the people who share your last name, I want you to hear me clearly. Your value is not defined by the absolute blindness or the predatory greed of a toxic household dynamic that refuses to see your worth. Strength does not mean enduring financial fraud, emotional neglect, or identity theft for the sake of an artificial family peace that only serves the thieves in your life. True power is born the exact moment you stop begging for the validation of people who trade love for currency, and you begin to use your own brilliant mind to establish unbreakable walls around your future. My victory was a beautiful achievement, a complete deployment of legal strategy that protected my grandmother's legacy and my own justice from the hands of criminals. But the true victory, the one that allowed me to look into the mirror every single morning with a peaceful, confident smile, was the freedom of knowing that I am more than enough. Home is not a geographic structure defined by a shared surname, a genetic code, or the toxic obligation to sacrifice your youth for people who treat your existence like a convenience. Home is where your boundaries are treated as absolute, where your hard work is genuinely honored, and above all else, home is where you are respected.